Hello, and welcome to Sky Career Talks, here where we get to discuss why communicating and connecting with Rutgers alumni is so important. Today we will be learning about Misty Rosas, a Rutgers graduate from 2005 with a Bachelor of Arts in History. Misty also received her Master's in Corporate Communications with a focus on social media for business use at Northeastern University in 2013. Now she works as the Director of MedTech, Communications, Acquisitions, and Divestitures at Johnson & Johnson. Today we will get to learn and listen about Misty's career journey starting from the bottom and working her way to the top. Hi, my name is Lane Klimak, and today I'm joined by Misty Rosas to discuss where Rutgers alums start their career after college. Misty, it is so nice to have you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Lainey. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, could you give me just a brief overview of your career journey so far?
Sure. I can start from when I graduated Rutgers, where I graduated with a bachelor's in art history. And I really took it quite seriously. I was prepared to move towards my PhD in art history. And at the time, my then boyfriend, now husband, suggested that I get an office job just to keep the lights on while I was working towards my PhD. So I did. I got a job at a small pharmaceutical company, and it was at quite literally the very bottom. I mean, the bottom being the front desk reception. Um, and it was not so bad. In fact, after 6 or 8 months, I was like, oh, I kind of like this corporate thing. I was doing well in that environment. And I also liked working for a pharmaceutical company because there were patients at the end of the day that we were helping. So it definitely gave me a sense of purpose. So I put art dreams on hold and I started working really just quite intently and purposefully at this pharmaceutical company. That said, front desk reception was a little bit boring. Probably surprise to no one, and I was eager to kind of provide value for the business. So in my time of boredom, I would volunteer to take spare projects that people weren't didn't have the time to do, and that got me noticed. I did little things like I started a dry cleaning service on site. When we hired a bunch of new people, I offered to pull together training materials and put together a training program. And by opportunity volunteering like that, I was able to build a little bit under my belt, even in my front desk reception position, so that when, in this instance, a role in training and development became available at a junior level, I was able to land that job. And similarly, I put my everything into it, and I proceeded to progress my career and get more experience in learning and development when I got a role that was both learning and development and communications. And at that point, I have fallen in love. Nope, communications, this is it. This is what I should be doing. So I went back to school, not Rutgers. I went to Northeastern and I got my master's in communications, which was a really exciting time. I was able to take the lessons I was learning in the classroom and immediately apply them to work because I was working in that field at the time. So a lot of great work happened there. I continued to diversify my experience, so getting communications roles across different functions, across different businesses. And then ultimately that led me to Johnson & Johnson, where I've been at J&J for about 7 years now. Prior to that, I was with Bristol Myers Squibb. I was with Celgene before they were with Bristol Myers Squibb, and a handful of other farm biotech companies that have since been acquired. And in my current role, so I started at Johnson & Johnson in consumer, spent a few years there before moving over to the corporate division, where I supported the technology organization, doing communications for their organization and broad enterprise technology communications, as well as supporting our CIO. Did that for a few years before moving over to acquisitions and divestitures, where I've been for some time now. I think that catches us up to speed.
That's very impressive and a very thorough background in communications. So, as you said, you started from the bottom at an entry level job and, worked your way up. During that time, did you see a certain type of technical or interpersonal skills that you think students need to start their career?
Sure. I mean, technical skills are important. You need to be good at what you do, but you've gone to college and you've gotten a baseline for what's important in communications. But those interpersonal skills can be a little trickier to identify and define. For me, one that came over time that I gradually realized was very important was executive presence. Having a bit of polish is really important. It gives you a sense of confidence that others will see in you, And the way that you develop that executive presence is by a few things, but I'd say it's primarily focused on what you know and what you say. So, but what you know, educate yourself. Before you go into any business meeting, before you go into any interview, do your research and understand who the people are in the room, what's important to them, what challenges they might be facing, and have some, introspective questions about, things that matter to them. So that's one part of it. Making sure that you're educated before you walk in the room, and it could be education on, like I said, business matters. That's probably the top one, but it could also be education on other things. For example, I'm going to Tokyo for business in a couple of months for the first time. I don't know Japanese, but I am doing my darndest to learn a little bit before I go there.
Very
And not that I intend to master Japanese, but it is a way to show that I respect their culture and I've done my part to learn a little bit about what's important in their part of the world, not just the language, but the business culture as well. So, like I said, what you know is part of executive presence. And then, secondly, what you say. So, for me, it's been very important to really have a sense of the words that are coming out of my mouth before I speak. And part of this is practice, right? So you practice a little bit. You practice what your platform is, what your elevator speech is, so that when you go to tell people about yourself, it's not the first time those words are falling out of your mouth. So polish up what you say, what you know, making sure that you're presenting yourself in a way that is appropriate for that business environment. Those are really important interpersonal skills. And then also a second interpersonal skill, critically important, would be the listening portion. So yes, you can listen to people, but active listening involves understanding, maybe even paraphrasing back what people say so that you understand, making sure that you're leaned into the conversation. And here I mean literally, like, lean forward, indicate that you're really interested in what people are saying, ask reflective questions that anticipate things that are important to them. So executive presence and active listening are softer skills, but they are critical to move you forward, especially as a communications professional.
That's great. And you talked about presenting yourself in a certain way, especially educating yourself on a background. So, presenting yourself is sometimes a struggle for college students, especially with networking. So, how important would you say networking is for the industry and developing one's career? What do you think students should know when applying for jobs and in the networking scene?
So networking first is critically important. I would not have any of the jobs that I have had over my career without just someone in my network or a mentor or a sponsor advocating on my behalf. So networking is critical, and you want to cast that net pretty broad. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm so busy with my day to day, I don't have time for networking." Yes, you do. You have 30 minutes once a week, and I would set that as a goal. Like set one 30-minute networking meeting up once a week, just coffee, virtual coffee. And for me, I have a formula that I use in those networking meetings that has served me well. So when I meet with somebody, and no one's ever said no, like when I reach out and say, "Hey, do you have time to meet? Just quick chat." Like everyone says yes. When you meet with them, there are three things that I want to cover during that time. One, the first question I'm going to ask is, tell me a little bit about yourself and your team and what you do. Listen to what they say. The second is you're going to get a little bit of yourself in there by saying, "Oh, that's really fascinating. I actually have an interest, or I do a little bit of that." And then you tell your new networked partner here, a little bit about your background or your experience or your interest in that area. And then the third would be to ask them, what advice do you have for someone like me that's looking to get into XYZ or this department or this team? And listen to what they say, follow their advice. And then you want to end with, is there anyone else you think that I would benefit from talking to? So that kind of three-pronged approach plus a who else should I meet for me has been a very successful way to plant the seed in someone's head. So it might not be today or tomorrow, but 6 months from now, if they are working on something and they hear of someone that, there's always work to be had, that needs an extra hand, they're going to say, "Oh, you know what? I remember somebody that was into that." And they might get back in touch with you and say, "Hey, I have an opportunity in X, Y, and Z." So and it could be like a stretch assignment. Those stretch assignments are critical to getting your next role or diversifying your experience. And they pretty much only come from networking, or at least they have in my experience, and they've been very valuable. Don't be afraid. I guess that another piece of advice, don't be afraid, don't be shy. Almost everyone likes talking about themselves, right? So you let them talk
Right.
about themselves for a little bit, and you're asking for their expertise. So don't let shyness get past you, or get to you, because networking conversations are just meant to be like kind of casual, but having a little bit of structure in there doesn't hurt.
I think that's really useful information for future students starting their career. It's imperative to be networking and talking with others. So, as we recall your time, back at Rutgers and through your career journey, do you have any tips or recommendations that you would give to students who are developing their career, or even just advice in general that you wish you knew at the time while you were in college?
Yeah. When I was in college, or especially when I was in my undergrad, I was very focused and had a very specific idea of what I wanted to do. Um, and I did not go down that path, obviously, and I'm so grateful for it. And that was in part because of the advice I received from mentors and friends, just to be open to new experiences, even if they aren't exactly what you expected. And that really served me quite well. Another kind of mantra of mine that served me well was the ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And that may be, you know, there's probably a bit more structure that's needed around that, because you don't want to do anything that is unethical or dangerous, or something that wouldn't ultimately benefit your patient or your customer. But like when I mentioned I started the dry cleaning service, like no one asked me to do it. I just called the local people, and then I got in line with legal and said, "Hey, I did this thing. Can you just check sure, make sure it's cool?" And then all of a sudden we had a dry cleaning service and people loved it. And that was an example from very early in my career. But since then, I've taken kind of the same approach. Like if I see something that needs to be done or something that needs to be simplified, I just have done it and put the results out there and listened for feedback. And that was something that served me well. In terms of getting the role, I have a few thoughts on interviewing.
Mhm.
So interviewing is a cool moment where you get to show people, sometimes at a senior level, like who you are. You don't get many opportunities like that to talk with a senior level person for half an hour and have their attention. So you want to make sure, back to that executive presence, that you are buttoned up, that you are polished. And I recommend using the STAR method. So you've heard of the STAR method for
Yeah.
interviewing? Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. For those who haven't, it's situation, task, action, and results. So what is the situation at hand? A little bit of background. The action, I'm sorry, the task that you are tasked with, the actions that you took, and what was the business outcome of the result. So when I'm interviewing, I have a piece of paper in front of me that has like 8 to 10 examples of my work or my behaviors or my skills, whatever the applicable one would be. And each of those would be examples that could answer many questions. So, have you ever faced an issue in your job? Like, did something change unexpectedly? How did you build a team? How did you build a network? So all of these would kind of touch on those areas. And underneath example, I have STAR, and I have listed out the situation at hand, the task at hand, the action that I took, and the business results. I also, in prep for those interviews, again, making sure it's not the first time it falls out of my mouth, I will practice my answer with a literal stopwatch to make sure that my answers are in between 90 and 120 seconds, because people don't have the time and they
Mhm.
want you to get to the point real fast. And also, if you ramble, that really deducts points from your executive presence. So practicing, you don't want to become robotic so that you're memorizing, but you want to have a good sense of what you want to say to get to the point very quickly. Um, and I should also mention that when you're thinking about your answers, because you've researched everybody you're going to be interviewing with and the role, think about, and this is important, think about what differentiates you, because there are going to be a million other really good people applying for the job. Like everyone, like I feel every time I interview that I'm up against the best of the best. So I think about, like, what is unique about me that differentiates me to make me good for this role. And I'll give you one brief example. When I was applying for my most recent role in acquisitions and divestitures, leading communications for that business activity, I went to business partners with whom I might interact in that role and asked them, like, what's important for this kind of role? I expected things like, oh, you need lots of strategic communication experience. great, like had that. But that's not what I heard. What I heard were actually softer skills as it relates to the business. So the capability or the behaviors that they were looking for, they talked about, you need to be comfortable with ambiguity in this kind of role because there are times that there aren't a lot of answers. You need to be fast, you need to be agile. So in hearing all of those themes, I went back and I reformatted what I call my platform, which is almost like a politician's platform. Like when a politician speaks, they're going to have the three things they want you to know. Those are those key messages, right? So in an interview, I have my key messages, which get tweaked a little bit for every different kind of role that you might apply for because different things are important. So when I applied for the acquisitions and divestiture role, my platform was around my behaviors, not necessarily my strategic comms experience, which I did talk about, but my behaviors of being able to navigate ambiguity with ease, being able to quickly pivot when business needs change, and also some of the emotional, like the EQ elements that are needed for that type of role. Um, and that got me the job, despite other people that maybe had a little bit more experience than me, but they were looking for a very specific type of behavior. So think about that when you go to a job interview, when you're meeting a new person. What value can I uniquely bring to this role, to this person, to this job, to this relationship that is going to set you apart from everyone else?
That is amazing advice to give for future students. I think, the interview process is sometimes intimidating, so these tips and tricks are definitely helpful for future students. So lastly, I just have, a fun little question to end it. Could you describe your job in 3 words?
Um, Ambiguity, for sure, diplomacy,
Mhm.
and purpose.
That's
I
great.
feel like there is a purpose at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And for me, that is to serve patients and play my small role in advancing health for humanity.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for talking with me, Misty. It was great to learn more about you and help students start their careers.
Thanks, Laney. Good luck to you and your fellow graduates.
Thank you.